Budgeting is probably one of the most important personal finance tools, and the fact that it isn't taught in schools is just absolutely ridiculous. So thank God we've got YouTube. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Jonathan, and on this channel we're on a journey to financial freedom, talking all things money, personal finance and entrepreneurship. Budgeting will help you feel in control of your finances and help you save money. And in this video I want to go through the best method for saving the most money as fast as possible. But this method can be adjusted even if you're not in such a rush to save a lot of money, as you can easily just adjust how much you're cutting from your spending. And the method I'm going to be talking about is very similar to what's called the zero-based budgeting method. And don't worry if you've never heard of it, because it doesn't matter. This method is for people who want to be fully in control of their money and save the most money in the shortest amount of time. I've broken it down into 5 easy steps to make it super simple. And I'm going to be going through an example. I've created a simple Excel spreadsheet to go through the example on. There are a lot of templates online, but to be honest, most of them are just a bit overcomplicated. And I think you should make budgeting very simple because it is very simple. So my spreadsheet is a very basic one. And I just want to note that in this example budget that I'm going to go through, for the income, I haven't used the average UK income because it is pretty high. So I'm going to be using a lower income, which is very similar to my budget from around 3 years ago when I was working 9 till 5 as an engineer. But the numbers don't really matter because the example is just to give an idea of how budgeting works. So let's get started with the first step, which is to work out your net income. So your net income is the amount of money you get paid each month after taxes. And this should be really easy to work out. Just look at your previous month's pay, and that should tell you how much you're getting after all your deductions. So after tax, national insurance and pension, if you do pay into your pension. So in this example, which I'll put up on the screen, I'm going to be using an income after deductions of £1,500. And the other incomes are just in case you've got any other incomes that you might want to add. So next, we basically want to list and categorize everything that we spend. So we'll start by listing all of our fixed expenses and then all of our variable expenses. So our fixed expenses are things like rent and mortgage payments, utilities, car and transport. So your fixed expenses are basically just anything that doesn't change each month and can't really be avoided. So things that just come out every month and don't change. It's unlikely you'll be able to cut back on these as easily as the variable expenses, but just knowing how much of your monthly income they take up can really be helpful. Next, we want to list all of our variable expenses. So these are just going to be anything else that we spend. Things that change from month to month, like food costs, toiletries, entertainment costs. These variable expenses are going to be where you'll find the most opportunities to cut back, but I'll come to that in a minute. The best way I find to work these out is just to look back at your following month's bank statements and just go through each transaction and categorize it. So categorize every single transaction into like housing, food costs, subscriptions, and just add up how much you spend on each thing. So for housing, we'd work out how much you spend on like rent or your mortgage payments, your council tax. Utilities, so just add up anything you spend on electricity, gas, water. Add up whatever you spend on transport, so whether you have a car and you pay tax and insurance, or even if you just use public transport. So just add up how much you spend each month total. As you can see here, I like to add any debt repayments here as a fixed cost. Then you have food. Now this is a big one, and this is probably going to be where you can cut back the most. So just make sure you add up everything. Add up all your grocery bills, any takeaways, if you go out to restaurants. Add all this up into the food costs for the month. Entertainment costs, so these might be things like going out to the cinema, going on a night out, going bowling, things like this. Just add them all up. Keep doing this until you've categorized absolutely everything that you spend. Step 3 is to set your goals. So the next step is to just think about what your financial goals are and how important they are to you and how fast you want to get to them. This is one of the most important steps because knowing what your goal is will help you decide what you should and shouldn't cut back on the next step. So just think about and maybe even write down exactly what your goals are. You may have short-term goals like paying off a small debt. You may have more long-term goals like saving up for a house deposit. You may have a very specific goal like you need to save an exact amount for your wedding. Or you may have a more general goal where you just want to save a rough amount for your retirement fund. Or you may even have a very broad goal, a bit like me, which is just to save and invest as much as I possibly can each month and build my wealth. And just decide what I want to use the money for later on. Because not everyone is going to know exactly what they want to do with their money. But just by saving and having it there, It's just one big step in the right direction. Just remember, your goals don't need to be set in stone, but identifying your priorities before the next step will help massively. Step 4 is to plan and adjust. Okay, so this next step is the big one, and it's time to look at what we're spending and decide what we're going to cut back on and how we will do it. To do this, we're going to go down the spreadsheet, look at every single thing that we're spending money on, and see how we could cut back on that expense. Now, before I start, I just want to say that every decision whether to cut back on a certain expenditure or not is entirely dependent on your specific circumstance and what your goal is. You have to personally weigh up how important that expense is in your life, and this is going to be different for everyone. A quick example could be owning a car. I personally don't own a car because at the moment I don't need one. I live in a city centre and pretty much everything is on my doorstep, so that saves me a lot of money. But for a lot of people, a car is going to be absolutely vital. You know, if you live somewhere quite rural or you need to drive to work, then a car is going to be an absolute must for you. Okay, so before we start with our expenses, we definitely want to look at our income because it's definitely something to think about. You could ask for a raise or a promotion, or even look for a better job. I know this isn't going to be for everyone, but it's definitely something you should consider depending on your goals. And if this is something you're thinking about, then make sure you check out my partner's channel. She's a careers coach and you can learn everything from writing a cover letter to acing a virtual interview. So if you're thinking about changing jobs, then make sure you check out her channel, and I've left the link in the description. So in this example, I've left the income as the same. But another thing you could do to increase your income is just to create another income source. For example, you could start a side hustle. And if you are thinking about starting a side hustle, make sure you check out my other video where I break down what I think the best side hustles are for 2022. Okay, so let's say you start a side hustle and you make an extra £150. So that's increased our total income after deductions to £1,650. Now let's go through our expenses. First is housing costs. Now there are a few ways you could cut your housing costs. You could move location or downsize. You could rent out a room, things like that. But in this example, I've left it as the same just because for most people, they're not going to be able to cut back on their housing costs because it is quite hard. Next is utilities. You could make sure you've got the cheapest supplier by going onto a comparison website, or just try and save energy by taking shorter showers, turning the taps and lights off when you're not using them. Doing these kinds of things can definitely save you money. So in this example, just by doing some things like that, you could save around £20 easily. The next one is car and transport. So like I said earlier, you could go without a car. You could try walking more instead of using the car where possible. Or you could just even make sure you've got the cheapest car insurance, again, by using a comparison website. Okay, so in this example, I've given us a saving of £40. Next is debt repayments, which I have kept the same just because you shouldn't really try to reduce your debt repayments because you're probably going to want to pay them off as soon as you can. Next, we've got food costs, which I think is by far where you can save the most money. I won't go into loads of details on how you can save money on groceries because I did make a whole dedicated video just to this topic, which I'll link up there. So let's say you implement a few of the tips that are in my video by, planning your meals and, cutting back on your supermarket costs. Let's say you save £60. So now that you've worked out that you can spend £120 a month instead of £180, you can do things like split it into 4, so you could give yourself a £30 a week budget and try and stick to it each week, or some people do it even by day, so you can just sort of try and schedule it, spend a certain amount each day, but it just depends on what works for you really. The next one is toiletries. So you might just be buying toiletries you don't really need, so just make sure you're looking at what you're buying. Are you buying expensive brands that you don't really need to be buying? You could drop down a brand. So in this example, I've dropped it down by £20, which I think is easily achievable. Next is entertainment costs. Now this is another one where a lot of people can save a lot of money, especially younger people, because at the moment there is such a social expectation to spend any spare money you have on either alcohol and going out or expensive clothes. So in this example, I've done a massive reduction from £200 to £20 because pretty much every entertainment cost is going to be more of a want than a need. This isn't going to be the same for everyone, and you just need to weigh up how much that entertainment cost really means to you personally and how much you value it, and obviously depending on what your goals are. Next is phone bill, so you could look at your payment plan, or you're using all your data and messages. You could drop down a plan, reduce money like that. So in this example, I've done a saving of about £20 a month. Next is subscriptions like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, or pretty much any subscription service you use. There are so many now. Just make sure you look at each one and ask, are you actually using it? Are you getting the value for what you're paying? If you're just using it once or twice a month and you're paying £10 a month for it, then are you really getting that value? And if not, just cancel it. And by cancelling just 2 subscriptions a month, you can easily save £20, £30. And the last expense I've got on here is gym. I wouldn't suggest anyone cancel the gym membership, but you could think about downgrading your membership if you're not using all the perks that you get with it. So maybe you've got a membership that allows you to use the pool or group classes, and maybe you never use them, so you could downgrade your membership to like a gym only. So this could easily save you £10 a month. Or maybe you go to a quite expensive gym, maybe you could just find a cheaper gym to go to. So after we've made our budget plan and we add up all of our expenses, it gives us a total of £1,005, which gives us a total surplus amount of money of £645. Now compare that to the previous month of £115. And you can see that by reducing your costs a little in each area can lead to saving a substantial amount of money. And of course, this is just an example, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to demonstrate what you can achieve when you use this kind of method. And just note that when you set an amount for your budget, think of it as a limit and not a target. If you end up spending less, then great, you get to save more money and reach your goals even quicker. And step 5 is track and review. The last step is absolutely crucial if you want to reach your financial goals. It's really important that you review your budget on a regular basis just to make sure that you're staying on track. Nothing is set in stone each month. You may get a rise, you may just spend more or less than what you expected. But as long as you plan and adjust your budget accordingly and follow the previous steps in this video, then you'll reach your financial goals in no time. This budget method has really helped me save a lot of money fast. But the amount you can save will always be limited by your income. So the best way to save even more money is to start a side hustle. So make sure you watch this video next to find out the best side hustles to make extra income this year. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.